Hi everyone, Sean Humphreys here. Welcome to this edition of the Take Charge of Change podcast. We're going to continue with reflections from the book Resilience by Eric Greiten. Today we'll talk about pain. Welcome to the Take Charge of Change podcast. In this podcast, we'll help you to lead a more resilient professional and personal life by sharing great content to make you smarter, more energetic, emotionally healthy, financially confident, so you accomplish your professional and personal goals in spite of the challenges that are sure to come your way. Pain, sorrow, joy, they're just part of the human experience. There are many kinds of pain and thankfully many kinds of joy to counterbalance that pain in our lives. Now there's the pain we seek and there's the pain that seeks us. What is the pain that we seek? Well, it could be the discomfort of training and improving our health, maybe getting ready for a sport and really pushing ourselves to get better. It could be the pain we experience at the end of a relationship that we know has to come to an end. It's not working out, that it's a toxic relationship. It could be the discomfort or pain of communicating difficult information to our staff. That can be very difficult. And then there's a pain that seeks us, the pain that thrusts itself into our lives, the unexpected pain resulting from circumstances that are, quite frankly, outside of our control. The great Stoic philosopher, Seneca, said that fate guides the willing and drags the unwilling. In other words, some people learn to work with pain in a constructive way, and other people fight against it and never learn the lessons it's trying to teach. You know, the Stoic philosophers can teach us an incredible amount about how to successfully deal with the inevitable pain that we will experience in our lives. Our choice to either accept or reject those things that are outside of our control is ironically the only thing that is completely in our control. Some people will take the lemons that life throws their way and make lemonades. We've all probably heard that phrase. It's a truism. Unfortunately, the majority allow the negatives of life to grind them down, and sometimes they get ground down by negatives that are actually pretty small at the end of the day. It's also interesting that the Stoics taught that we should be grateful for what we have, to treasure the blessings of our life. But at the same time, they also cultivated this notion of holding on to the blessings loosely, because they understood that life in a heartbeat, in an instant, can rip those blessings out of our lives. That's just the reality. If we hold them too close, without understanding that they are transient sometimes, it could devastate us when we lose them. The Stoics lived the concept out to the extent that they even meditated in advance of the evils or pain that they could eventually come into their lives. And they faced their own fears really very much head on because they premeditated on these fears and their responses to them. They often, through these meditations, came to the conclusion that their fears were overblown and that they had the ability and the resilience to overcome these concerns. Now, the Stoics also rationalized that if we face our fears in advance, we'd be better prepared to deal with these events if they actually arose or came into our lives. Now, this wasn't just plain old worry, right? Just ruminating about all the problems in our lives. They have thought through productive responses to the pain and to the challenges. And as a result, painful experiences were not as much of a shock to their system because they'd already gone through it in a virtual kind of way. They almost inoculated themselves against the impact of pain and challenge. The Stoics taught that this is not just an inside job. Yes, there is work that we need to do in our internal lives, but there's also important defenses that we need to build outside of our lives. If we don't pay attention to these other defenses, pain and suffering that comes into our life can quickly overwhelm us. So what are some of those things that we can do to prepare in advance of the pain that it's sure to come, right? What can we do? Well, we can build additional defenses through living a virtuous life, looking after our physical and our mental, our financial and spiritual and intellectual health. I think that's a start. We can build important defenses through friendships and the relationships that we surround ourselves with. That can be a critically important way of providing defenses and to play a role in supporting us during times of pain and challenge. Being a lone wolf is a sure way to be overcome by the pain that enters your life. And we can also build defenses through the development of strong character qualities. It could be the quality to be persistent, to be loyal, to work hard, to be patient. And finally, we can build defenses through the practice of discipline and planning and adapting through our lives. Now, the great philosophers, when we look back through the ages, and the great traditions teach that there's no such thing as a quick fix. There's no way around pain. There's no shortcuts. There's no easy solutions. As Eric Greiten says in his book, Resilience, for most of us, the road to wisdom comes from walking down the dark path of pain. And so we can learn in different ways, but for many of us, it's the pain and suffering of our lives that creates change. In life, we'll experience the rich tapestry of emotions, happiness and fear and depression and joy. Some of the greatest leaders down through the centuries struggle with depression as an example. One just has to look at the life of Winston Churchill. He experienced an amazing ebb and flow of victories and challenges, but all through his life he was dogged by depression. He often referred to it as a black dog, and as he described it, he had coping mechanisms, but it never kept him from having an impact. Rather than letting it overcome him, he developed very specific strategies to get through those dark days and to come out the other side of them. So to make progress, we need to fight against the quick fix tendency of our culture. So when we look at our culture, we live in a society that wants to medicate depression out of our lives, actually pretty much medicate almost every challenge out of our lives. Unfortunately, when we do this, we actually make ourselves weaker. Medicating during episodes of depression or being bluesy or down robs us of the growth and learning that we may be able to glean from these times, these tough times. If we get through them without the help of drugs, we can actually potentially become stronger. We'll learn some lessons. There are reasons to be sad. We're wired to be sad, to maybe become depressed. This pain does hurt. But by masking it, right, by taking these experiences and muting their impact in our lives through medication, we rob ourselves of the growth and strength that can take place when we emerge through these valleys of pain, struggle through them, come out the other side. The task is not to take away the pain, but to renew and cultivate purpose and to cultivate defense strategies to get through these difficult times. Now, I'm not saying that some people shouldn't be medicated. I mean, there's definitely situations where that has to be the case. But I think our culture tends to default the other way, where we overprescribe and overmedicate, where sometimes struggle is what we need to be doing. One philosopher said that pain is God's megaphone. It causes us to notice. It alerts us to issues. It narrows our focus and informs us as to the areas of our life that we need to pay attention to. Pain can motivate us to change. Pain is when the real work of change is catalyzed, that it begins. So yes, pain is difficult, but for many of us, it's also important that we change our relationship to pain. Working through pain and in spite of pain, it's an important work and discipline, because believe it or not, we can grow our wisdom and effectiveness from what pain teaches. Well, I hope you enjoyed this edition of the Take Charge of Change podcast. For more resources, please be sure to take a look at the show notes for this webcast and take a look at the links that we've included. All the best in your journey to professional and personal resilience.